The state of refugees, there's over 30 million. They're mostly coming from Syria, Afghanistan, and Ukraine, but there's also some from South Sudan, Myanmar, Sudan, DR Congo, Somalia, Central African Republic, and Eritrea. These are obviously nations that are dealing with conflict currently, but there's refugees, of course, from all around the world. Now, starting with the biggest origin country of refugees, Syria, most Syrians have moved to Turkey, but also Germany as well as Lebanon. So 2 out of 3 of those is for geographical reasons. Syria borders Turkey to the north and Lebanon in the west, and a lot of this will come down to geography, like the neighboring country. Then there's Afghanistan, which apparently many Afghanistanis are going to Iran. The nation of Iran has taken in the most refugees according to this. Obviously, that's another nation that has been dealing with a lot of internal things going on. Interesting to see Germany intaking refugees from 2 major sources, as we talked about Syria, but also the other big one is Ukraine. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian refugees are really being divided between either going to Germany, Russia, Poland, or basically anywhere else in the rest of the world. Most people from South Sudan are going to neighboring Uganda. People from Myanmar are going to neighboring Bangladesh. Was gonna mention I was surprised to see that the US isn't taking more refugees. They're pretty low on the list. But part of that reason is that all of these countries here are in the Eastern Hemisphere. It's hard to get to the US. Gotta cross an entire ocean. That's part of the reason. I thought Canada intakes more refugees than we do though. That might be on a per capita basis though. I mean, basically compared to their overall population. But here's something that kind of goes hand in hand with that topic, just from like 20 years ago. Government's position on the Iraq War prior to the invasion 21 years ago. So in orange, we have obviously the places that participated in the war in Iraq, obviously, USA, but also the UK, Denmark. I'll be honest, I did not know that. I knew about Poland, and then Australia follows us into battle no matter what. They're like literally our homie that's down for whatever. Then in yellow, we have the states that did support the invasion. So Colombia, Nicaragua, and El Salvador, which Nicaragua is an interesting one because now Nicaragua, they don't normally vote with the US in terms of UN resolutions, right? Also Ethiopia supported it, Eritrea, and Europe was pretty divided. There was Spain, Italy, the Netherlands, Czechia, Romania, Hungary, all 3 of the Baltic countries, of course Afghanistan, but 2 years prior we'd already invaded Afghanistan. That's not a surprise. Kuwait was down for it. Obviously they were a pretty crucial ally. And then our homies in Asia, the Philippines, South Korea, and Japan. Then all the blue places opposed it, which as you can see was a majority of the world it looks like. Our 2 neighbors, Canada and Mexico. Cuba is not surprising. They're going to vote against us. Most of South America, most of Africa, and then the big European countries, France, Germany said no. All of, well, actually, no, never mind. I was going to say all of Scandinavia, but no. A lot of Nordics said no. Greece and Turkey finally agreed on something. Interestingly, all of Iraq's neighbors, even Iran, opposed it. And remember, 10 years before that, you had like Operation Desert Storm. Pretty much everyone in the Middle East was like, no, don't do that. India, China as well. Of course, in gray states with uncertain or no official standpoint. Yeah, we definitely kind of just did that without the world's approval. Definitely one of those moments where we was like, well, who's going to stop us? That's great. And keep in mind, this is directly linked to that refugee guide we just saw. Part of the reason why there are so many Syrian refugees is because their neighbor Iraq was invaded and then the domino effect. The top 10 largest 19th century battles. This is one of my favorite time periods in history and we don't talk about it almost at all. So starting off the list, we have the Battle of Austerlitz in 1805, basically when Napoleon was still rising to fame as he was about to defeat the Russian Empire and Austrian Empire. Number 9, the Battle of Waterloo, where basically Napoleon would come to his end. Man was about to be exiled again. Another Napoleonic battle, this one 1812, as France was going to lose to the Russian Empire, while both sides would suffer massive casualties, but overall this was going to kind of poison the French. They'd eventually freeze in that Russian winter. In 7th, we have this battle between Austria as well as Italy and France. Now this was France helping Italy to gain independence to weaken Austria. They're forced to give up Milan and northern Italy, but they did keep Venice. It was an important step for unification of the Italians. Another Napoleonic War, this time in 1809. Here we go, something a little bit later in the 1800s, we have the French Empire versus Prussia. This is Napoleon III, his nephew. Another battle that same year against Prussia and France. This would eventually lead way to the German unification. Battle of Dresden, another Napoleon thing. 1866, Prussia versus Austria, again leading to German unification. Finally, Napoleon 1813. Wow, it really kind of just shows, it puts everything into perspective. These are the top 10 battles in the 1800s. 5 out of 10 of them were all just Napoleon in the early 1800s. What a drastic difference that century had from beginning to end. There was actually 6 Napoleonic battles here on this list. I like how they tried to bring back the old big battle tradition by the end somewhat of the 1800s. Well, they definitely would in the 20th century because they started world wars then. Cities in the 1700s with over 100,000 inhabitants. This is a lot for that time. And I believe if I'm correct, it would be Paris that's technically the top city in terms of population. Maybe something in China, of course. London actually might have had Paris beat, then Constantinople, Naples. But funny to see how 300 years later, these are still very big relevant cities today. Also also insane that there is literally nothing in America. Remember, this is still like the age of colonization. It's still kind of going on full steam ahead, but there's still not that many people here yet. It would take another 100 years before they really started racking in some numbers. Nothing in Africa except for Cairo, Egypt. Also, Oceania is still kind of being colonized. There's a lot of people living in Asia. Hard to fit people in the desert at this time, so Saudi Arabia is not going to pull in a whole lot of numbers, or the Arabian Peninsula as a whole, which they still don't relatively, but they're doing better. Interesting to not see Rome on this list. What was going on? I guess Rome was just a historical site at that point. Look how many people were on Sicily. That's crazy. Wouldn't expect it to see so many people on the island of Sicily at this time. Okay, there you go. Rome is listed of having this, maybe. Rome's population actually decreases depending on what century they're in. Something tells me there still should be more cities included on this map. Map of U.S. cities founded by France. Oh god, the horror. Of course, New Orleans being the big one. Here's the French spelling there. As well as Baton Rouge, a very obvious French sounding city. Surprised that not everything in Louisiana is French founded, but just because it's in Louisiana doesn't mean they have a city in all the territories, you know what I'm saying? There's Lafayette. I should have known that was a French founded city here in Texas. Mobile, Alabama was founded by the French. Wow. Again, it might not have necessarily had all these types of names. It probably sounds a little bit different in French. How would you say Little Rock in French? Oh, St. Louis. That actually went way over my head. I didn't know that was founded by the French. Starting in the 1700s, the French explorers arrived. Spain took over in 1763. Oh yeah, you have the state of Illinois too. That sounds pretty French. Remember that the French had, yes, French Louisiana, but Louisiana wasn't just super nerfed back then. They basically had all this. So the US has a ton of cities that were originally started by the French. And there are some city names that I honestly should have known was French, but it didn't even cross my mind. St. Paul. Really? Cheyenne, Wyoming. This is really why I need to study the French language, because there's so many English words that are clearly French, and it's just going over my head, like I said. Louisville, Detroit, Chicago. Of course, I'm throwing my American English accent over all these words, but and the French ended up getting way out there, way beyond Louisiana territory, at least the maps from what we saw earlier. And the funny thing is that map is not even including all the names. There are some cities that are missing. White Castle restaurants located in the United States. Gotta admit something, there was this movie when I was a kid called Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. I had no idea what White Castle was, and I thought White Castle was just a made-up food chain for the movie itself. I didn't know it was a real place I could go to. It took me a long time, like a scary long time, to realize this was a real place. Honestly, I don't even know what this, I guess they sell burgers? Their big thing is sliders, and it started in 1921, so it's been around for over 100 years. And you can kind of see why I had no idea for such a long time what a White Castle was. We don't have them in California, and I bet you these ones that popped up in Vegas, Nevada were pretty recent. Yeah, the first White Castle that opened in the western side of the US was 2015. So they're all over New York and New Jersey, and they're big in the Midwest, Minnesota, Michigan, all over Chicago, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky. There's also one single one in Florida. Is this like a Dunkin' Donuts thing? Like, I know Dunkin' Donuts is really popular in the East Coast. Here, not so much. Don't hate me. I also don't get the hype either. Maybe you guys don't get the hype for In-N-Out. I understand that. If that's okay. I've had In-N-Out my entire life, so I'm kind of over it by this point. There's apparently only 350 White Castles in all the US. I mean, now I'm curious. I do want to try it. I'm probably not going to be impressed. I'll go in with expectations low. Time magazine named White Castle sliders the most influential burger of all time. What? Where young people are the happiest. I wonder how they gathered this data. Also, it's mostly in Europe. There is no USA. Starting off the list, we have Norway and Australia, which the gray number next to their name represents all ages, so their overall happiness rank. So as I talk about many times, Finland has been the happiest country in the world, I think 4 times in a row. They're number 1. But they're actually only 7 on this list. So the Finnish population that is 30 and under are slightly less happy. I mean, they're still pretty up there, but we also have Sweden and El Salvador. No way. That one is really shocking, and a lot of that must have happened recently. Yeah, there was basically a big jump in 2023. This man's been doing a lot for El Salvador. World's coolest dictator. We've got Kuwait in 16, then there's Slovenia, Croatia, and Switzerland. But look at Croatia ranked 14th with young people, but 63rd overall. So the youth is just really having a blast there. The old timers, not so much, I guess. There's Austria and Costa Rica. The young people did seem to be pretty... I feel... Never mind. In the top 10, we got Czechia, the Netherlands, and Romania. Then it's Finland, Luxembourg, Denmark. Ice in 4th. 3rd is Serbia. And Lithuania, number 1. But normally they are 19. So young people are just having a blast in this small Baltic nation. I guess I need to go visit Lithuania. People are all talking about Israel, but I know this is BS because there's no way in hell Serbia is 3rd. I have to admit, I'm still a little skeptical of like happiness indexes. Like the ranking and the criteria, they don't make a whole lot of sense to me. Let's go ahead and talk about something way less happy, where water will be much harder to get by the year 2050. Oh, geez. So unsurprisingly, it will be in nations kind of closer to the equator, or if they have more of a desert, or possibly if they just have a lot of people. India, the top populated country in the world. There's several reasons why water can become a scarcity for certain countries. This is using projected human population numbers by this year and the water demand. So we will be experiencing a 20 to 40% increase here in the US. That's considered medium to high on this scale. Mexico is going to be in a lot more trouble though, because they'll be experiencing a 40 to 80% increase. That's such a really big range right there. Of course, colder countries near the Arctic will have less problems getting fresh water. That's pretty much the case for all the countries like really up north. However, interestingly, there's a lot of nations in Africa along the equator that are going to be doing just fine. Of course, you don't need like ice melts to get fresh water. There's other ways to acquire this. Those dark blue nations are going to see only less than a 10% increase of demand. That's crazy. In 25 years? Chile is the only country in America that is in the black category, or extremely high in other words. Peru is also going to be struggling. Keep in mind that side of the continent is a bit drier because of the Andes mountain range, of course. Chile has all these icy mountaintops though. They can use some of that. So Belgium is going to be struggling. They're the big outlier, the most northern country that's going to struggle in 2050, but as well as Greece and Spain, also San Marino for some reason, or is that the Vatican City? I don't know. Italy's not just going to give Rome more water. Wait, there's only like 200 people that live in the Vatican, maybe 700. What's going on? So when it comes to water scarcity, it's mostly this region of the world people talk about. It's already extremely hot. It's already extremely dry. And this is where we start to get into the territory of countries possibly going to war over water at some point. That is a terrifying thought. And big thanks to my patrons.
DrewI'mYourDadBackWithTheMilkLookOutside.
Kansas was mentioned.
DoOOCHBAGGINS.
aPhatNarwhal.
Carmel
Amateur Archaeology.
DaBeautiful-MEGAN-Underwood.
Fredrik
Henrik
Hedlund.
InquisitorXarius.
JohnDenver.
KirinoIsBestGirl.
LuxembourgLover.
RyeThePie.
I love
The
Tambre.
Mexican 760.
And ZaneyBoi.